Hey, you may have noticed this is not my usual style of video. Don't worry, I'm not completely changing the entire course of my channel. I'm just trying something different uh, for fun because I was writing this as a normal essay, and then I was like, hey, I could make this a video essay. That would be kind of cool. But I will be returning to my Silent Hill updates once I have more to show. I just don't have anything to have enough of a difference to show right now because I wasn't working on it very much over the summer. You know how these things go. Anyway, now that that's out of the way, if you're new to my channel and you just stumbled across this in the wildness of the internet, welcome. Never made a video essay before. Might be a bit of an interesting experience for everyone involved. So, yeah, with that out of the way, let me get into my actual spiel here. Venture Bros is a show that unexpectedly wormed its way into my heart, and it has refused to leave since. Dean Venture, in particular, is a character that I was drawn to right from the start. I found a sense of connection with something about this naive and anxious person who makes mistakes and grows a lot over the course of the series. But there was something else under the surface, and since early in my first watch of the show, it just nagged in the back of my mind. Something about this character felt so unintentionally transcoded. I just didn't really know why, and I rattled around in my brain a lot, drawing and writing and just generally thinking about it. And this ultimately led to dealing with these thoughts as such, creating this comprehensive body of work to examine why Dean comes across this way to me. And before I dive into actually putting these thoughts into words, I have a quick preface/disclaimer that is separate from the preface that I gave before this. So, this essay is effectively an evidence-backed opinion piece. It's not an attempt to claim that this is the one intended reading of the character. It is a interpretation. I'm not trying to say this is canon. And if you disagree with any of the points I make or the overall thesis of the piece, that's perfectly fine. I totally get that. Additionally, this contains spoilers for the Venture Bros, probably the entire show. I talk about anything that's relevant across his entire character arc, so I'm covering stuff from like every season. Also, I will be referring to Dean and as he throughout this entire thing. Although my main thing is that I believe that he is actually would be a trans woman in this reading, and I usually refer to her as Dawn, but I wanted to make things clear for people who are coming into this from the character from his normal canon perspective, so I figure it makes things clear. So I just wanted to get that squared away before I get into things, so yeah. In my original posting of this essay, this section was actually the final one. A point that struck me as the most obvious on the surface, but I felt could seem shallow without the context of everything else. However, a friend told me that this part helps recontextualize the rest, so I've decided to test putting it first for this video version. This point being Dean's more feminine behaviors throughout the series and how he's treated by others in his life for it. Acting in ways that are seen as feminine does not automatically make one a woman, of course. I mean, but anyway, it's still notable for Dean's character in this context and in the greater context of the other points I'll be talking about, especially when we consider how he's made to feel it's a bad thing and how he tries to hide it as a result, but he still continues to enjoy and want to do these things despite being treated poorly or, basically kind of bullied for it. A set of tutorial drawings in the Go Team Venture art book directly refers to Dean as, quote, a little more childlike, even a tad feminine, while contrastingly describing Hank as the more masculine of the two. So, even without looking at the show itself, there's already supporting material to that. And this idea is reinforced many times throughout the actual show as something the characters believe in themselves. I would say this is purely implied just through the way characters interact or react to ways that he does things. except for the fact that there is a literal direct exchange between Brock and Rusty in A Very Venture Christmas.
But Dean's a little
more feminine,
tougher to shop for.
Outside of being directly called feminine, Dean is also often referred to by his brother in particular as a wuss or a crybaby, which isn't completely untrue. He is shown to be more sensitive on several occasions, particularly in the earlier seasons, such as crying when he just thinks his family is being torn apart, or when it's not actually, or when Hank throws his book on the ground during careers in science. I mean, to be fair, he did also think that his dad was dead, but anyway. This is something he seems to have also kind of internalized, seeing as his hallucinatory hero's journey in Showdown at Cremation Creek Part 2 includes characters making fun of him for being a crybaby.
This is just stupid. You bother the great white oracle for this? That shivering child? Clearly he's incompetent, and I bet he's a sissy.
Yeah, or a crybaby. Is this true? Is baby gonna cry? Like a little baby cry, huh?
I'm not a crybaby!
Don't kid yourself there. You're a bit of a pussy. No offense.
I can do this.
These characters also bear resemblance to his father and friends of his father, which kind of have some implications in and of itself. There are also numerous occasions where Dean is tied to more traditionally feminine interests, regardless of whether it is explicitly pointed out. One that always stood out to me is a short scene in Tag Sale.
Hey, Dean, I found your doll.
That's an action figure.
No, this is your old dolly.
Give it! She's mine!
Afraid was yours. Dad put a price tag on it.
Well, it's not his to sell. This is my Princess of Camelot doll. Because I should get the money and stuff.
I think this encapsulates his general behavior in this regard pretty well. There are things that he likes that would be considered more feminine, but he may hide it due to the fear of being judged or teased, although he doesn't always hide it. A slightly more subtle example of this is later on in Season 5.
What are you doing in my drawer?
Doc thinks the compound's been bugged. I was just looking for...
In my diary?
I think it's a journal, Dean. Diary isn't. It's a girl's word.
Fine, journal. Now leave.
There are also instances where he openly takes on a more feminine role for various reasons. For example, in Fallen Arches, he tries to put on a showing of Lady Windermere's fan to entertain Triana, despite her complete lack of interest. An interesting connection of this work to my overall themes is its plot's emphasis on gender roles and the performative, constructive nature of these roles, which I can't really get into the specifics of because that's not the point of this video, and also I'm not super familiar with the plot myself, but I was reading a little into it out of curiosity. Anyway, it's an interesting connection nonetheless. Smaller examples of this are in the music video of From the Ladle to the Grave, the Shallow Gravy story, where Dean dances in this devil costume, which I think is a parody of an existing music video, but I could not find it specifically, or if I did, I forgot to write it down, so oops. Anyway, there's also when he acts as a stand-in for a Black Widow killer to help train Rusty on how to not get killed by her in the Terminus Mandate. Most infamous example of Dean taking on a feminine role is definitely the one he's forced into in Love Bites. I use the term infamous because, frankly, it's an uncomfortable situation for him to be in. Unlike the other listed instances, this was not one of his own volition, and being forcibly married is just not pleasant in any sense of the word, especially when you're not even an adult. However, it is still worth discussing for the sake of this analysis. To summarize this episode, for those unaware or in need of a refresher, the Venture family crashes in Underland and are captured by Varen Underbite. Varen mistakes Dean as a woman due to him being dressed as Princess Leia from Star Wars, and decides the two will be married before he executes the rest of the Venture family. Dean inevitably reveals his biological gender shortly after the two are married, causing Underbite to be banished from his own kingdom for breaking same-sex marriage laws. From a trans rating perspective, Love Bites adds on an interesting layer, because his enjoyment for more feminine things and his potential underlying desires are dragged out for all to see in like a twisted and upsetting kind of manner. The marriage aspect in particular is notable as being a very traditional representation of a woman's role in society, and considering how Dean puts one of his future jobs in one of the later episodes, Pomp and Circuitry, as just husband, and even in another episode, The Better Man, a hypothetical future Dean is represented in this sort of house husband role. Whether it's something he genuinely may want, or something he's drawn to because of his perception as a typically female role, or both, he is linked to this concept, which is interesting. And this forced marriage drags him out in front of everyone, including his family, and makes him play out the role in a context he doesn't want. Interestingly, despite his clear discomfort with the actual marriage part, he doesn't seem to mind being in the role on a more abstract level. Up until the ceremony itself, when his family arrives, he never tries to correct anyone on his biological gender. Like when the Baron says that he's gonna marry him, he doesn't say anything about that. Aside from the fact that he doesn't want to get married, obviously. And in fact, when the eunuchs actually discover who he is, they actively agree to keep this a secret. The aspect of his reveal coinciding with being reunited with his family is also notable to me, since it parallels his behavior in instances like the doll in Tag Sale. He has to break out of the role because they know who he really is, and he doesn't want to be teased or shamed for it, although I'm sure it's also because he doesn't want to stay married to the Baron. No surprise there. Overall, Dean is drawn towards enjoying things or behaving in ways that would be considered traditionally feminine, but fears the way he'll be treated for it. While this is an issue that extends beyond the trans experience specifically, it's definitely one that's familiar within it. It's this feeling of being trapped within the expectations of your gender, wanting to be something else or do things that aren't acceptable, but fearing how you'll be judged for it. Desiring to be a certain way, but the idea of openly exposing that to others is terrifying or risky. Playing it off as a joke or otherwise backpedaling on it if you're called out. Being the brother that's tougher to shop for because what you say you like and what you actually like might not line up at all. From early on in the show, Dean is set up to follow in Rusty's footsteps, both within the story and from our outside perspective. He's designed to resemble Rusty, especially in contrast to Hank. He shares his father's lanky build, even their head shapes are the same, his reddish hair, and even his freckles are a shared trait with the younger Rusty. His hairstyle in the earlier seasons even matches Jonas Sr.'s exactly, which I can't help but think contributes to this image of him being the one to continue the legacy of the Ventures. Dean is also established as the smarter of the twins, despite the fact that both are still fairly naive at the beginning of the show. Even in the first episode, Dean implies this when he says to Hank to
Leave the thinking to me, Albert Einstein.
Hank backs up the idea in past tense, directly calling Dean a smart kid, and this general comparison comes up often throughout the series, serving to strengthen the impression of Dean as being the one that takes more after Rusty. This extends to the characters' opinions in-universe, too. Rusty in particular makes it very obvious as the series progresses that he favors Dean, and believes that he will take his place one day. Even back in Season 2, this starts presenting itself, with a notable example being in Hate Floats, the second episode of that season. On what is supposed to be the twins' 16th birthday, Rusty's idea of a birthday present for Dean is a speed suit, something he obviously doesn't want, but he gets no choice in the matter. And this one example, even though it's very small, it encapsulates the struggle between the two for pretty much the entire series. Rusty is certain that Dean is just like him and will become just like him, and Dean very much does not want to be just like him. The other major element to this is how Dean actually deals with this across the course of the show. In Season 1, we aren't really seeing the favoritism from Rusty yet, but we do see what their relationship is like otherwise. Dean definitely idolizes his father to a degree at this point in the show, actively proclaiming that
You're the best dad in the whole world.
despite things he does that would very much suggest otherwise, and showing confidence in his abilities as a super scientist. A great example of this is in Ice Station Impossible, where he's uncharacteristically calm about his brother's apparent impending death. And he says it's because
Our dad's a super genius with, like, chemistry stuff. He can fix this no problem.
which Brock refutes. He's definitely at his most naive and in denial of the more negative aspects of he and Hank's life at this point, so it makes sense that he'd think highly of his dad still. Although, the cracks start to show by the beginning of Season 2, but it's definitely ramping up by Season 4. Dean starts recognizing his struggle with wanting to please his father, but feeling forced into things he doesn't want as a result. He isn't in active resistance yet, but it is a starting point. The most in-your-face instance of this is in Perchance to Dean, when he says,
I don't even want to be a scientist. I'm only doing this because my dad made me do it.
and we get a similar admission in Bright Lights Dean City when he talks to Brown Widow about his frustrations.
Yeah, I'm not really sure I want to be a super scientist either, but my dad really wants me to follow in his footsteps.
It's also worth noting that the plot of this episode involves Rusty intruding on Dean's space during his entire internship, despite his obvious discomfort with the situation. Season 5 is the definite turning point. Dean's worldview is shattered, forcing him out of any vestiges of naivety or denial. He becomes vocally disillusioned with Rusty and the adventuring life in general. He pulls away from everyone, including Hank, and it's pretty obvious that he's struggling throughout the whole season. Specifically in regards to Rusty, this is the first time he spells it out to his face. He burns his learning bed and most of his old things before telling his dad that,
Sick of living my life in a box. I don't want to be a scientist or a boy adventurer or even a venture brother anymore.
He also makes it very clear through his other behavior throughout the season, like refusing to go on adventures and getting into contact with Myra despite her status as a threat. His appearance reflects the change as well, dyeing his hair black and growing it out. Considering the previously noted similarity between his hair and both Jonas Sr.'s and Rusty's, it's clear that this is representative of his shift in character towards active rebellion. In Seasons 6 and 7, Dean has been able to work through his self-isolation thanks to Hank's positivity at the end of Season 5. His disillusionment with his father remains, but he's reached a more balanced point in his attempts to find his own path. Despite this, he still wants a different life for himself, and Rusty continues to fight him on that. This is primarily seen in regards to Dean's schooling, in which his father tries to take control of multiple times. The first instance of this is a short exchange in the Venture Bros and the Curse of the Haunted Problem.
I made it in art class. Told you could take art.
A more extreme example comes later in the same season, when Rusty signs Dean up for several science classes against his will, and he has to go out of his way to drop those classes. By the conclusion of the series, his and Rusty's relationship does seem to be in a better place, so I like to hope that he's able to pursue his own path with less friction, though speculation on events after the series aside, you're probably wondering, what does all this have to do with the transgender part of this transgender analysis? I needed to lay out the greater context of Dean's character so I can show how this can be related to a transgender experience, like I was doing in the first section. His character arc isn't solely about his relationship with his father, it's about identity. The struggles with his father are one part of a larger identity pie, for lack of a better phrase. Of course, stories about struggling with identity do not automatically have to be trans. A lot of times these points are like that. They are overlapping because it's a, thing that can be interpreted in multiple ways. And, stories with the trans experience are almost always going to involve struggles with identity. It comes free with your transgender status. Especially when you're talking about living up to expectations and following in the footsteps of your family or your parents. Let's take a step back to look at the bigger picture. You have a kid who lives in a very sheltered environment and looks up to his father. As time goes on, his father is pushing for them to become more alike, but he's simultaneously becoming more aware of his own naivety. He realizes he doesn't want to be what his father wants him to be, but for a long time he's afraid to say anything because he still wants to please him. What finally pushes him over the edge is losing a friendship to his own jealousy and social incompetence, something in part as a result of his sheltered upbringing. He's sent further down after learning he isn't even what he thought he was, causing him to self-isolate as he tries to reconcile his identity. He's able to make peace with his identity through the support of others, but he still doesn't fully know what he wants in his life, and his father still hasn't let go of the idea that he'll follow in his footsteps. For me, at least, this is very akin to a trans experience. There's this certain expectation, whether spoken or not, that you will one day end up a certain way. At a certain point, you realize, hey, I don't want to be that way. But it's not always easy to say anything right away. You don't know how people will feel, you don't want to rock the boat, or you don't fully understand it yourself, or you're just straight up in denial at first. So you keep it to yourself. Until eventually, inevitably, it boils over and could be worse off for it. And you're faced with the truth, and you have to figure out how to deal with that. And you'll probably end up telling people close to you, and they may resist it or not understand. Especially if your father has always been hoping you'll be just like him. But you're not like your father. Not in the ways he wants you to be. The namesake of this part originates from a comment made by Doc Hammer in the Venture Bros art book, where his role is summed up quite well. Dean is a fulcrum. Things happen around him. This is true throughout the entire show. Once you notice it, it's hard to miss. Almost everything that happens in Dean's life is the result of other people's actions. All these events happen to and around him, but it's never because of his direct actions. He's pulled along for the ride of whatever crazy decisions somebody else made that day, or 20 years ago, or whenever else. In other words, Dean does not get a choice in the life he leads for most of the show. Things happen, and he is stuck passively observing and reacting. You could look at just about any episode of the entire show for instances of this happening, but one example that comes to mind is Victor Echo November. You would think an episode about Dean going on a date with Triana would be one where he's granted significant agency. But the date isn't even something Dean actively chose to do. He didn't ask her out or get to plan anything about it. It was something arranged between Dr. Orpheus and Rusty out of convenience. As Orpheus directly puts it,
Yes, Mr. Venture has been kind enough to give me some leeway with rent if I get the boys, as he says, out of his hair for the evening.
On top of that, he doesn't actually get to have much of a date at all. The whole event is crashed early on by Phantom Limb calling a hit on the Ventures, literally just as a way of showboating to the Monarch. This exemplifies two different ways in which he is usually forced into scenarios. Someone else decides he's going to do something, and getting caught in the crossfire of someone else's actions. Sometimes the illusion of a major choice is not even entirely his own. In Operation Prom, the misguided plan to win back Triana after she leaves is actually Dermot's idea. He comes up with the whole plan, and Dean goes along with it as some desperate last-ditch effort. Although Dean still agrees to the idea, which was his own choice, it's interesting to note that a major character event like this one technically falls under this category of someone else decides he's gonna do something. Later on in the show, when he's making more efforts to become his own person, he starts to make choices of his own accord that are in active opposition to these previously established categories. In The High Cost of Loathing, as previously mentioned, Rusty enrolls Dean in several science classes. This is a case of someone else deciding he is going to do something. However, rather than passively accepting this, he goes out of his way to cancel those classes. This episode also has an example of him taking action against a crossfire scenario when the Monarch crashes Professor Von Helpen's botany class. Dean actively de-escalates the situation by writing the Monarch a check for $1 million, under condition that he leaves them alone. While he hasn't escaped the cycle of wild events happening around him, he's at least starting to act in active defiance. He's starting to see that he doesn't have to only be the Fulcrum, he can have an active event on these events in his life. How does this piece tie into the trans reading? To put it simply, I see the act of transitioning as an extension of working in active defiance of the cycle you're stuck in. You're forced, whether directly or through expectations, to be a certain way, to do certain things. Do what you're told, go with the flow. To be trans is to be in opposition of what you're told to do and how you're told to be. You have to make the active choice to open up about it and pursue the life you want to have instead of the one you're forced into. As you likely picked up on, this also ties back into Dean's relationship with Rusty. All these aspects of identity are tied together, distinct yet with clearly overlapping areas. While I have written on each of them separately, they do not exist in a vacuum from one another. Would it really be a proper analysis of Dean's character if I didn't touch on the clone thing? I alluded to it in part 2, but I knew it needed to be its own dedicated section. Dean discovering that he and Hank are clones is one of the 2 major reasons for his tipping point in Season 5, and it's a major aspect of his identity-related turmoil. Dean learns the truth about his origins in A Very Venture Halloween, where his initial response to the information is,
Frickin' Frankenstein! I mean, Frankenstein's monster. Whatever! You can't play God!
So clearly he's taking it very well. In his eyes, there's something wrong and different about him for being that way, and he doesn't know how to process that. He self-isolates in Season 5 primarily for this reason. He feels like he can't talk to anyone about all the things he's trying to work through and reconcile. He somewhat opens up to Thalia about it in What Color Is Your Clean Suit with,
Now I don't even know who I am. I can't even tell my brother. He'd be devastated. It's like I'm different from everyone else, and I'm just completely alone.
Despite his initial feelings on the subject, finally opening up to Hank at the end of the season is what gives him the reassurance he needed from the start. Briefly taking a step back from the events, or the direct facts of what happened, it's also worth thinking about the existential concept of Dean's scenario. You're a copy of someone who has already died time and time again, with no way of knowing for certain how similar or different you are from the original. Things about you could have been fundamentally altered to make you better by someone else's definition, and you would never know. Maybe if you deviate, you'd be replaced. Are you even still you after so many times being remade? How would you know? Is it even right for you to be alive after dying so many times? With all that in mind, it seems like a perfect time to segue to the other aspect of this whole cloning thing I want to cover. D19. He is the defective Dean clone that was aborted by Rusty, or as he puts it, due to his defects, but manages to survive and live in the attic of the compound for years. There's a certain irony to the fact that a clone abandoned by Rusty lived longer than any of the ones who weren't, but that's not the main point of this section. In Perchance to Dean, the 2 Deans have their own simultaneously occurring scenarios. Dean spends most of this episode trying to do science, focused around preventing his future hair loss, after Rusty started pushing him to get more into super science. D19 is instead focused on his goal of becoming a real Dean, which leads to him trying to kill Dean and take his place. Notably, both Deans are being driven by aspects of appearance and acceptance. D19 wants to be pretty. He wants to look like the other Deans and be accepted as one, to be accepted by the father that left him behind, going as far as to create a skin suit out of previous Dean clones, believing that if he looks like the rest, he'll finally be accepted. Specifically, what he says to Dean when confronting him is,
What's your pretty little life? And your smooth, pretty little face!
On the other hand, Dean is doing science because he knows it's what his father wants, and because he's afraid of losing his hair. While D19 wants something he never had, Dean is trying to keep his father's acceptance when he knows that he's only doing it to make him happy. It's also notable that the fear of balding can be connected back to him not wanting to become like Rusty, since it's another physical aspect they share. Beyond those connections, I believe D19 gains an additional layer of meaning from the trans perspective. Aside from being generally less pretty than the other Dean clones, he specifically is missing the hair on the top of his head. While not for the same reason, it parallels Dean's previously established fears around balding. His build can also be seen as more masculine, with a bulkier upper body than the typical Dean, and beyond his appearance, there's also elements like the illusory Rusty chastising him for having a stuffed animal, his obsession with becoming a real Dean, and the literal Dean suit he creates in pursuit of that goal. The Dean suit is of particular note due to it being an obvious reference to the film The Silence of the Lambs, where Buffalo Bill creates a woman's suit for similar reasons. While I won't be going into the complexities and criticisms of that movie's portrayal here, this connection is notable in the context of a character's desire to become a woman in a way that is explicitly framed as horrific or dangerous. From a trans perspective, D19 can act as being representative of dysphoria and negative perception. He just wants to be accepted for who and what he is, but is seen as not pretty enough. He observes the way others act, trying to be like them, trying to look like them, but it isn't seen as enough. He takes this to an extreme level with the skin suit of previous Dean clones and his attempt on Dean's life, something representative of the way trans women in particular are often vilified, or how someone may fear their desires would be perceived by others. It could also be seen as the way trans people are sometimes treated as if they are killing their prior selves through the act of transitioning. Notably, much of this turmoil around becoming real and being pretty happens in D19's own head, personified by this fake Rusty. This parallels the distress around self-perception that primarily occurs within one's own head when dealing with gender dysphoria, which can include making assumptions or projections about how other people might perceive you based off of how you feel. One additional concept of note around the being a clone is the overlap with expectations from others, as explored in previous parts. It would be hard not to compare yourself with tons upon tons of exact replicas that came before you, all designed to be a certain way. Especially considering Dean by Season 5 has matured past the point of any of his predecessors effectively deviating from the original image of Dean as a person. As the series progresses, Dean strays farther from this original naive and sheltered version of himself. He screws up, becomes disillusioned with the way things are, and tries to assert himself as his own person on his own path. And not everyone likes that, even from a meta perspective. I'm sure there are people who would have preferred he stayed innocent, untarnished by mistakes and hard truths. And even from an in-character standpoint, he may feel like he's an imposter due to not being the original Dean anymore. To bring things back around to the main trans perspective, Dean's experience with being a clone can be compared to being trans in multiple ways. There's learning the truth about your identity and having to keep it a secret, your mental well-being suffering as a result. The relief of being able to tell someone who supports you and not having to keep it to yourself anymore. Feeling like you're fake, that you desperately want to be real but you never will be. Fearing physical changes that can make you be seen in a way you don't want. Fearing that you're ugly or monstrous or dangerous, or that you can be seen as those things by others. Wanting to be accepted but not wanting to give up who you are to do that. Questioning your entire identity, wanting to become your own person and follow your own path, while simultaneously fearing that if you do, you won't be you anymore. At the beginning of the clones section, I noted its discovery as being one of the major reasons for his tipping point in Season 5, with the other reason being, of course, Triana. While the character aspects related to her may not seem as directly related to my overall trans and identity focuses, I believe there's still something here to discuss. This connection may seem more speculative than my others, but I wanted to include it for the sake of thoroughness. Triana is, without a doubt, a major figure in the development of early season Dean. She's introduced in Season 1's Eeny, Meeny, Miny, Magic as the daughter of Dr. Byron Orpheus. He falls for her immediately, and the two end up becoming friends over the course of the next few seasons. His massive crush on her always colors his interactions with her, however, as he's usually trying to impress her in some way, or is just thinking about her in general. This starts as early as her introductory episode, where he both fantasizes about her and comments on how cool her name is. Unfortunately for him, Triana doesn't completely reciprocate these feelings. While she does call him cute, she seems more interested in him as a friend overall. Additionally, the Masters talk with her in The Better Man, where he takes on the form of a hypothetical future Dean, acts as the final nail in the coffin regarding her feelings there. In the same episode, Hank implies the two spend time together off-screen via a line about helping her shop for shoes. He uses this as a way to point out the one-sided nature of Dean's crush, but it's also notable in regards to the idea that they spent time together in a friend capacity beyond what's actually directly shown to us. As touched upon in previous sections, Dean ruins their friendship entirely during the events of Operation Prom, when his jealousy towards her moving on and getting a boyfriend causes him to lash out in an immature way. This is what initially leads into his rebellious streak in Season 5 as he feels frustrated with his own naivety and lack of real-world experiences. Triana is important to this overall character arc because she's the first glimpse into the normal world, his first peer and friend who isn't his own brother. While his crush on her is definitely real, I think it was exacerbated by the fact that she was the first girl his age he'd ever met, mixed with true love already being on his mind at the start of that episode. He was so eager about this normal human connection that he became almost obsessed with gaining her affection. So when he lost that only link to the normal world from both her moving away and getting into a relationship, he didn't handle it very well. Not that I'm justifying it, because he was still being a dinkhead. What I described may not appear to connect back to the overall trans interpretation on the face of it, especially compared to something more directly comparable like the clone experience, but I believe there's an aspect of it beyond the surface. I alluded to this within the title of this section, but Dean's relationship with Triana could be interpreted as having elements of gender envy, or at the very least a peek into the possibilities outside of his own sheltered reality up until that point. That might sound kinda out of left field, but I promise I'm gonna try to explain my logic behind this one the best I can. As already established, Triana was the first girl his age that Dean ever met, maybe one of the first girls in general. They bonded as friends, before he ruined that later down the line. She was his first exposure to what girls his age are actually like. He seems to think she's so cool and interesting, and is just overall kind of obsessed with her liking him. Despite his claims otherwise, he even takes on a look somewhat resembling hers after ruining their friendship. It's not exactly the same, but it's the same general vibe. And the way I see it, this situation almost acts as a reverse to the situation with D19. Rather than being a reflection of these negative aspects and fears, Triana represents what he could have or may desire to have, both in the sense of wanting to be with her and perhaps wanting to be like her. To compare his relationship with her to the concept of gender envy, my anecdotal understanding that attributes three main feelings towards it. This sort of feeling of, oh, they're so cool, I want to be just like that. Or a potential jealousy or envy towards them for having what you want, or feelings akin to a crush, where it can be difficult to tell the difference between wanting to be with them or be like them. I could easily see Dean falling into the camp of being particularly fascinated with Triana because of this combination of things, where he desperately wants her to like him while also wishing he could be more like her. He becomes jealous that she gets to leave and gets into a relationship that isn't with him at a time where he's becoming more silently frustrated with his own life. She is the view into the possibilities of what he could be, and the one to inadvertently help him realize how sheltered he is through the way he lashes out at her. As part of his identity crisis and trying to become his own person, he partially imitates her despite their falling out because she is his ideal for what relatively normal people his age would be like. She is, in a way, what he wishes he could be. Writing this has given me a chance to properly dive into and sift through the thematic elements behind Dean, both in general and from this transgender viewpoint. His struggles with identity and finding your own path in life are seriously resonant for me in comparison to my own journey in gender identity and my identity as a whole. It's fascinating how the clone elements, particularly D19 and his abandonment, end up aligning particularly strongly with these identity struggles and dysphoria in particular. He's clearly someone who feels trapped within his current identity, struggling to find a foothold against all the crazy things in his life, to break free from a cycle of passive reaction. He wants to be normal, to be like other people his age, to understand the real world. While the transcoding of Dean's character was almost certainly unintentional, I appreciate being able to reflect upon these kinds of feelings and experiences through a character, and to see those things reflected back at me. Dawn Venture as a concept has come to mean a lot to me. She deserves the chance to make an active choice to break the cycle of the Venture legacy and truly be her own person, to determine who she really wants to be, not what other people want her to be.
It's okay, Brock. I know what it's like to feel bottled up inside. Sick of living my life in a box!
Hey, thanks for watching this all the way through. I appreciate you taking the time to listen to my thoughts on this, especially seeing as it's outside my usual video stuff. I had a lot of fun writing this, and it wasn't even originally going to be a video, as I kind of already said. I got the idea because a friend mistakenly thought that I was making a video essay when I said that I was writing an essay about Dean, and I was like, actually, that could kind of work, though, and I just kind of ran with it. I think this is still a one-time kind of thing, unless I get extremely overly passionate about writing something like this again. So it's probably mostly going to be back to my normal Silent Hill updates, and maybe some Let's Play stuff if I ever get the motivation to do those again, but I don't know. I do want to go back and finish Lunacid and stuff. Anyway, I hope this was an interesting perspective, and that this was a interesting video in general, even if whether or not you agree with what I had to say. So, thank you for watching.